Coming up, Florida sends a big message that the Jim McElwain era is over once and for all. We'll tell you all about it next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. We're glad you're with us. We got a fun hour of SEC talk here on the program. We're getting close to signing day on Wednesday. Hope springing eternal for a lot of SEC teams, and my guess is we're going to have a pretty strong close here for a lot of the programs we talk about a lot.
Yeah, we're also going to be talking about some dance moves, whether whether you're Odell Beckham Jr. or whether you're sitting in the Florida fans section over the weekend. So that should be fun.
A lot of that coming up on today's show. Let me do this though. Start with speaking of Florida, item number 1 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10, and this may seem like a little thing. I think overall it's a pretty big thing as Florida sends maybe a bit of a symbolic message here. It's, as I said, item number 1 on our SEC Country Live First and 10. Scott Strickland, the Florida athletic director, met with some reporters over the weekend. The subject kind of comes up of some changes being made to the interior there at the Swamp, the football stadium known as Ben Hill Griffith Stadium, and come to find out, the banners, the East Division banners, Florida, of course, won the East in 2015, 2016 under Coach Jim McElwain. They were shown somewhat prominently inside the stadium there, but apparently that's going to be no more. Here is the exchange that Strickland had with reporters about taking these banners down off of the interior of the Swamp. Take a listen.
The East championships came down in the Swamp. Whose decision was that?
I guess ultimately it was mine. You know, part of that is we're going through an assessment of kind of our signage and our graphics throughout all of our facilities, and we don't have any other division titles listed in any of our facilities. You know, baseball's won a bunch of division titles. They're not recognized anywhere. We recognize SEC and NCAA championships pretty consistently across all of our venues in every sport.
So I take this as kind of a big deal. I know that Strickland sort of paints it as, we're just reevaluating the way that our signage looks inside of our stadium. But while he says it that way, I take this as symbolically a bit of a message, especially when you pair it with what Dan Mullen said at the basketball game a few days ago, that he came here to win a national championship. Jim McElwain was constantly trying to push the importance of, hey, don't forget we've won the division. But at Florida, divisions don't matter that much. They care about national championships. From that standpoint, I think this is a pretty big move by Florida, and it's a move that I sort of agree with. For me, from my perspective, this is Florida sort of sounding like Florida again, as opposed to what McElwain had this program, which is something less than what the program had come to be known for.
Yeah, I think it piggybacks off what we kind of talked about last week when we talked about how Florida is one of those universities. There's only a handful of them in the country that can say, hey, we count national titles. We don't count, all these other things out there. We count national titles. And I thought it was important to kind of see through Scott Strickland's message right there. It was almost like he sounded like, I kind of read between the lines as, hey, if we start hanging up division banners, we're just not going to have anything room for it. We're not going to have any room for all these things. We have all these sports that win all these division championships and conference championships and national championships that at Florida, we have to move other things out of the way. And these division banners just aren't going to stay up. It was cool when you felt like Jim McElwain was building towards something and the McElwain era was underway and Jim McElwain might lead them back to a championship that you could kind of see the chronological order of banners. But with them gone and Jim McElwain gone now, it does feel like a fresh start, and you feel like Florida can finally be Florida again.
Twan Miller in the comment section says, awesome move, go Gators. He's got the Gator emojis on there as well, so he likes that. I'm not a Florida fan, but I like this for Florida as well, because here's ultimately what you learn about the Jim McElwain era. He won the East twice. That wasn't good enough to save his job. Right. He got fired during the season. So therefore, if the East Division can't protect you from getting fired, then it's probably not worth hanging on a banner inside the stadium as well.
That's a great point.
Serious.
No, that's a great point. I mean, it's very applicable to how you felt under Jim McElwain because it was like, hey, we're winning the East, but it was almost like, Missouri was back-to-back East Division champions the first couple of years they were in the SEC, and it still felt empty almost. It was like they backed their way in and the East was at a low spot and you were doing some things that the East wasn't, used to be doing. Georgia wasn't playing their way in. Florida wasn't playing their way in. Neither was Tennessee, South Carolina. And it felt the same way with Florida, where they're getting to the SEC title game, but they're getting housed by Alabama, once they get there. So it did feel empty.
Not every team in the SEC feels this way. I'm going to show you a tweet that sort of proves that in just a moment. Before that, though, actually, we'll go ahead and take a look at this right now. The Barstool account for Alabama shows you Auburn sort of painting its SEC West championships banner inside its locker room there. I should say, I guess the weight room. The Barstool Canada, Alabama kind of points that out. So not every team feels that way. Based on what we just said about Florida, is this Auburn doing something that should be beneath the program?
I kind of feel like it should be. But then again, I feel like Auburn had a pretty special year, so you want to have something to reflect back on. And there's still, I guess the point for me is Gus Malzahn's still there, and he still feels like Gus Malzahn's building towards something. If they had lost their coach, I don't think they'd be putting this up. I think it'd be on to the next one. But the fact that Auburn did have a special year, it was under Gus Malzahn, I'm not going to hate on them probably as much as people think I will, being an Alabama guy. But I kind of see where Auburn's going. I just respect the fact that Florida's like, you know what, we're not celebrating that.
Jay State in the comment section says, ha, I bet Auburn keeps the few they have up, and obviously that's indeed what happens there. Patrick Todaro says, time for Mullen Mania. We're climbing out of the pit of misery, hashtag dilly dilly. Obviously kind of an appropriate statement after all the Bud Light advertisement at the Super Bowl last night. Speaking of Dan Mullen, Scott Strickland also spoke a little more about him and the attitude that he brings to Florida. The East Division banners coming down, just part of the big talk that Mullen's already kind of brought back to Gainesville. Here's a little more from Strickland.
He is not afraid to be aspirational. There are leaders who are afraid to put themselves out there because you put a high bar and you don't reach it, you're worried about being criticized. And Dan, his confidence is at such a level that he knows the expectations here are going to be to win championships. So don't hide from it. Talk about it. He's going to be judged. All of our coaches here are judged based on their ability to win at that level.
I really actually like that from Strickland there. And y'all know I'm not a Florida fan. This is not me blowing smoke. I mean this. This is the kind of talk that ought to be coming out of Florida. It is one of the programs in the SEC that can set the standard and the bar a little higher than others can. Florida's won national championships under two different coaches. That really matters. Yeah. You know, Meyer had his era. Spurrier had his era. There ought to be big talk, aspirational thinking and speaking coming out of Florida. Strickland sounds like that. Mullen sounds like that. Now, neither one of these guys have brought this to Gainesville. That's probably worth pointing out. But in terms of the expectation for Florida, they're getting it right in a way that Jim McElwain never did in terms of understanding those expectations.
Yeah, and to me, it kind of resonates with me. And we talked about Scott Cochran smashing the runner-up trophy for the national title game for Alabama last year. It kind of resonates with me in that way. And you know, there was people around the SEC that didn't like that, and we do have Philip Young in the comment section. He says, I understand the point, but at the end of the season, if you're winning your division, that's something to be proud of. And I definitely can understand that. And listen, there was nothing that was more proud for me in 2008. We won the West Division. We ended up getting beat by Florida. We ended up losing to Utah, but I was still proud of it. I got a ring from it. Never wore the ring, and we wanted to get back there. But if there are some guys that are were seniors on those teams that were division champions that do want that feeling of being proud and looking at their banner hanging up in the stadium. I just want to applaud Scott Strickland for saying, you know what? While that's good, we strive for more heights with some of these things.
Yeah. Tyler Mann also in the comment section pointed out how this may be a little bit like what happens at Tennessee, where they say we're not wearing those smoke gray uniforms anymore, basically sort of like detaching anything from the Butch Jones era. This may be another example of that from Florida, detaching anything from the Jim McElwain era. And as far as the division still being important, to Strickland's credit, he mentioned that. He did say that divisions are still important because they enable you to win the SEC. It's just not a finished goal for the season. And even in 2008 for y'all in Alabama, ultimately what you did in 2009 was the sort of finished product, whereas 2008 was really just sort of the start of it.
And that's what I was kind of saying. Under McElwain, it was like you hung those banners up because it's a stepping stone. It's like, hey, we're gonna go down this step and we're gonna climb the ladder, and it'll be cool to look back on these banners when we do win an SEC title or a national title. But that all left the building in the course of a year. It was like, we're division champions, and all of a sudden, we're not good enough, and then all of a sudden we stink. And somebody else brought it up in the comment section too, and I can't scroll down fast enough to get it, where a lot of people feel like Jim McElwain won with Will Muschamp's players and Will Muschamp's defense, and all of a sudden, those guys weren't there anymore, and Jim McElwain could not get it done last year at Florida, so he's out the door. So the reaction we're getting in the comment section, it's mostly applause for what Scott Strickland did down there.
Item number 2 here in our SEC Country Line First and 10. Obviously here on this show, we're very famous for talking about the SEC and football every single day. That's 12 months a year, a day after the Super Bowl. The rest of the sports media can obsess over that game. We're still going to talk about what we talk about here, which is the Southeastern Conference. But it was kind of funny to watch on social media last night how much of y'all seem to sort of take the Super Bowl into that sort of SEC-type conversation. Obviously, with the deficit being what it was, New England trying to come back. There was a lot of tweets about, hey, you got to put Tua Tagovailoa in the game. So much so that at one point in time, Tua even felt a need to sort of respond to this, obviously based on him coming in and saving Alabama in the national championship game. Booger McFarland says Patriots need to put in Tua. He says this on Twitter. Tua comes back at him. OMW LOL. Now, I have to admit something here. I guess this just sort of shows you how old I am. I didn't know what OMW stood for. I thought that OMW was like a way of saying like OMG, except it's oh my word instead of oh my whatever. Like I didn't know that OMW meant on my way.
On my way.
Somebody had to sort of explain that to me. Is that sort of common social media language?
It's extremely common. As a matter of fact, I think
you even know OMW?
Oh yeah, if you put in OMW in your iPhone, it autocorrects to on my way with an exclamation mark.
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's one of those things where it's definitely on my way, and I love that Tua responded to this. It's, you know, first of all, right after the game, like days after the game, he's responding to some of these tweets, and they're all about Jalen Hurts and, you know, how people should look at Jalen Hurts and the fact that, you know, you shouldn't put Jalen Hurts away. He led this team to a national title game, but this does show a little bit more of a playful side from Tua, where it feels like he's kind of accepting that as like, yeah, I was the savior. Yeah, you know, I'm on my way right now. I'll help the Patriots out.
Chad Clark is like me. He says, oh, my word. That's what I thought OMW stood for. I thought it was like somebody, you know, Tua's kind of a religious guy. I didn't know he went the OMG route. I thought OMW might have been, oh, my word. That's sort of what I thought it was.
No, you're swinging and a miss. You definitely aging yourself.
Listen,
right there.
I told you.
If I know what it was and you didn't,
that's a bad thing.
Yeah, that's a bad thing.
But what it shows you about Tua, though, here is, you know, there are obviously championship games every single season, but not every single one of them is remembered. Last night's Super Bowl, you know, for a lot of folks, it may end up being a memorable game. But Tua coming in for Alabama in the national championship game, as much as it pains me as a Georgia fan to say this, that's one of those sort of like pop cultural touchstones that's going to be referenced for a long time to come. Alabama wins a lot of national championships. They don't all have the same sort of top-of-mind memory, but Tua coming in this year is the kind of thing that 10, 20 years from now, people are still going to be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of circles, and especially Alabama circles, you know, you're going to call that an iconic moment. And it could have been, you know, it could very well still be a changing of the guard at quarterback for Alabama that could lead to great years from Tua. But it was one of those things where nationally, even if you weren't an Alabama or Georgia fan, you kind of hold your breath and say, oh my God, like they're seriously putting in their backup quarterback at halftime in the national title game. And this just further, you know, I think points to evidence that really was an iconic moment for the sport.
Well, listen, I mean, I can tell you that when Tua comes in the game back in January, speaking from the perspective of a Georgia fan, there's this little bit of fear that sets in of, oh no, Georgia doesn't have enough points. All of a sudden, 13-0 feels pretty good when you got Jalen Hurts on the other side. It's not really completing passes.
Right.
When Tua comes in, all of a sudden that 13-point deficit doesn't feel like enough anymore. And sure enough, Tua, when he plays the game, plays very much like I think we thought he had a chance to play a lot during the season. He came in and gave Alabama the spark that it needed.
Yeah, I think what's funny about it too is you kind of, you know, you bring it back to the Super Bowl and the fact that, you know, the Patriots have Tom Brady, who's the greatest like comeback quarterback. I think in all 5 Super Bowl wins he has led comeback victories in the fourth quarter. So that just goes to point to you about how much, you know, everybody still turns to that point in the national title game.
Bo Molinari says, so you're saying that Nick Foles, who was the Philadelphia backup, channeled his inner Tua? To a certain extent, he kind of did. And I think, and I actually talked about this morning, but on Dog Nation Daily, I think this also shows you the importance of backup quarterbacks now. You know, you can't really control outcomes of seasons, right?
Yeah.
Carson Wentz gets hurt. You got to have a backup ready to
Yes.
go. Hurts struggles. You got to have Tua ready to go. Jacob Eason gets hurt. You got to have Jake Fromm ready to go. I mean, you know, this day and age, you got to have 2 quarterbacks. You got to have, you know, talent contingencies for whatever might happen. And the Super Bowl is an example of that. Both SEC teams that played for the national championship, that's an example of that. You got to have some backup plans ready to go. No pun intended.
There's no doubt about that. And I think Paul Feinbaum actually talked about this earlier today on Jock's Radio over in Birmingham. He alluded to the same thing where football is just not. It's not the same as it was, you know, 15 years ago at the quarterback position. And I don't know if it's because quarterbacks are running more or, you know, you can point to whatever you want to. They're trying to protect quarterbacks, but it seems like more so than ever, a backup quarterback is an important thing in a championship run. It showed its head even for Georgia this year. You know, you look at Dak Prescott last year for the Cowboys when Tony Romo has the injured back. You look all around football, and some of the best quarterbacks were backups at some point. Even Tom Brady at a point, you know, during his career was a backup.
Michael Clyburn, one more point on Tua, and then we'll talk about Auburn here for a moment. Michael Clyburn, who is a Mississippi State fan, says, I'm tired of all the Tua talk. I agree he's good with the potential to be great. He only played 1 half. I mean, come on now. Is there a chance that Tua is overhyped? I mean, I'll tell you that I think that Tua is going to go on to have an outstanding career. Do I think he's going to win a Heisman Trophy, as you said before, betting on the field against any one player is
Right.
always the better bet. But is there a chance that we are making too much out of a brief window of football, that Tua ends up being just sort of an ordinary player, maybe even loses the starting job back to Jalen Hurts at some point? Or did we really see the emergence of a superstar in that game back in early January?
It would be hard for me to say, he goes backwards at some point. I feel like the sky's the limit for him. It's, you point to the fact that he's a true freshman, but is he overhyped? I don't think there's any question about the fact that he's overhyped. I mean, he is the leading, when you look at the odds for Vegas, he's the leading quarterback in terms of Heisman trophies, which is a quarterback, which is a quarterback award. You can look at, J.K. Dobbins, and I mean, Khalil Tate's going to be right there, but the fact that Tua's sitting there at like 10 or 12 to 1 right now tells me that he's overhyped, and Vegas right now is preying on those odds, just saying, yeah, give us your money right now because there's no way this guy wins the Heisman Trophy next year.
For me on Tua, for him to sort of come back to the pack and prove that the national championship game was a fluke, he'd have to have an offensive line falter, and I don't think that's going to happen. He'd have to have limited weapons at wide receiver. I don't think that's going to happen. He's obviously got all the weapons he can want at the running back position as well. I mean, he's got so much around him. We know he can deliver the football. We know he's got a good head on his shoulders. I almost don't see a pathway for failure for him. I'm not telling you he's going to win the next 2 national championships and the next 2 Heisman trophies, but in terms of being a competent quarterback, we've already seen the evidence that I have a very hard time seeing how he could fail.
Yeah, I think Bo Molinari brings up a good point in the comment section too. He says that's why the Aggies are in good shape next year with both Nick Starkel and Kellen Mond, both in their experience.
Good point.
And I think that resonates with a few different teams. I think when you look around, at a place like Mississippi State with Keaton Thompson, when you look at Alabama, obviously with 2 quarterbacks, Georgia's going to have 2 very good quarterbacks on the roster. Those are the teams you feel like are primed to make a run because there's not so much. I mean, I look at a place like LSU right now. They don't have one quarterback really. Maybe Florida being the same way. And if you feel like if one of those guys that starts falters at some point, then there's really nowhere else to turn at points.
Let's do item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And we told you the other day, we talked about this briefly, about ASA Martin, the Auburn signee, being Mr. Football in the state of Alabama for 2017. And at that event, when he talked about what his future plans are at AuburnAL.com, caught up with Martin, and Martin lets us know that he wants to be a starter, potentially, for Auburn here in 2018. He says, we've got great guys at Auburn. I'm going to try my best to compete and start at running back. I don't feel any pressure at all with that. So he's excited about coming in, competing, getting a chance to be on the field and participating, maybe even being a starter in 2018. I'm going to ask you a 2-part question here. Now, look, scouting reports are always, you haven't broken down every piece of film on him. None of us have. But is it realistic to think that he could start? And the more important question here is, does Auburn need Asa Martin to become a starter caliber running back here in his freshman season?
I don't think they need him, and I don't think there's really that much of a path for him to start. When I look at running backs and being a former offensive lineman, I look at protections. I look at third down protections. I look at, can you be a 3-down back? Can you catch the ball out of the backfield? Can you do everything and pick up the blitzes like you're going to be asked to do at the running back position? I look at a guy like Cam Martin. I look at Jatavius Whitlow that'll be in the backfield for Auburn this next year. Those guys have already been talked about, specifically Whitlow with his blocking during bowl practices. And I feel like, listen, Asa Martin to me is going to be an incredible back for Auburn. But when you talk about coming in and starting, I think he just has to be a piece next year for him. I think he has to be the DeAndre Swift, the Najee Harris, the piece for them. I don't think he just comes in and takes over and gets all the carries and rushes for 1,500 yards. I think that'll happen down the road. But when I talk about starting at a university like Auburn that has had so many good running backs, I mean, you go back to a couple of years, Peyton Barber's leaving and Rock Thomas is leaving, and then it's like, how are they going to deal with those guys leaving? And then Kerryon Johnson comes in and Cam Petway comes in. And there's just a long list of guys at Auburn that I feel like have stepped up to the plate. And for me to say, there's going to be this freshman running back that steps in and is number 1 running back from day one, I have a hard time for that.
You mentioned Rock Thomas. Jonathan Harris in the comment section says Rock Thomas started as a freshman a couple of years ago. And listen, I'm on the record as saying that I don't think Auburn's running game is going to have a problem next season, despite the fact that Kerryon Johnson's not there anymore. Cameron Petway's not there anymore. I think the track record for Gus Malzahn shows the running game is going to be fine. We don't necessarily know who the names are, but we have a pretty good guess about what the production is going to be. Yeah. However, that said, I still think that if you can get a big-time contribution from Asa Martin, that's a step towards that for Auburn. I mean, you made the comparison a moment ago with DeAndre Swift and Najee Harris. The only thing I'm going to push back on here is, if Harris was the only running back at Alabama, he could have had a huge season. If DeAndre Swift was the only running back at Georgia, he could have had a huge season.
I agree.
The limited productivity for Harris and Swift last year weren't based on their freshmen, they're not quite ready yet. It's based on the fact they were just better running backs ahead of them on the depth chart. So if Asa Martin is as good as Najee Harris or as good as DeAndre Swift, that's great news for Auburn because there is no Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Bo Scarborough, Damian Harris on the Auburn roster right now. If Martin's that kind of freshman running back, he may get some of the totals that Swift and Najee could have gotten on different kind of teams.
Yeah, I think there's the pathway when you look at it like that. I think when you look at a guy like Zamir White, I mean, obviously all the tools, it's going to be a great running back, but I think you look at guys who haven't even been feature backs in front of them that you still feel like are going to be good. And so I still treat Cam Martin in that respect. I think he could be a game-breaking type of running back. And I brought up the name Jatarvius Whitlow a minute ago. He's the name who Gus Malzahn was very high on back in bowl practice, was picking up all the blitzes, all the stunts. Was quoted as saying, we love him at running back. We love where he's at and we love what he's doing. So even though we haven't seen some of those guys, I still feel like it's going to be an uphill battle for a guy like ASA Martin to just step in and on first down of the first play be the go-to guy for all.
I mean, for me, this is a top 10 team again in 2018. So it's just a matter of sort of figuring out who are the guys that sort of allow that to happen, who are the guys that sort of facilitate that process. And I think that ASA Martin could be one of those guys. Let's move on here. Let's talk about the LSU Tigers for a moment. It's item number 4 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And last week on our show, played a little bit of audio from defensive coordinator Dave Aranda from LSU on the ESPN affiliate, the radio station in Baton Rouge. On a different subject here today, though, talking about his thoughts about the brand new LSU offensive coordinator, Steve Ensminger. Now, not brand new to LSU, but brand new to being the full-time offensive coordinator, calling the plays here by trade, as opposed to in the interim basis. And y'all know I've had my reservations about what I think that Ensminger is going to be able to do for LSU, but apparently Dave Aranda likes him a lot. Here's what he told the radio folks out in Baton Rouge about what his thoughts about Ensminger are up to this point.
Coachy is crafty. I remember early when I first got here, our first game that year was Wisconsin, and I would be pulled into offensive staff meetings, and all the guys would be in there, and I'd hear them talk and the whole thing, but I was always singled out Steve, because when he would talk, it was always well thought out. I'd go, yeah, you're right. That's right. Yeah, because he would see things, and he'd give up really good suggestions, and that's where I first really, because being in those meetings right away, I knew who the guys were, but I didn't know their backgrounds. I didn't know. I imagine maybe I should, but I really didn't. And so, just hearing him talk and hearing the way that his mind worked, I singled him out from that.
Will Ward in the comment section says, Ensminger's not that good. Roll Tide. That's Alabama fan weighing in on this. And while I don't think Aranda's words are intended to be calculated there, they do sort of fit into the whisper campaign that's been going on at LSU of, Matt Canada was part of the problem here. Matt Canada was the reason that this is not going the way that it's supposed to go. This sort of feels like it's a part of that campaign. I have a very hard time believing that in a room that included Matt Canada, Steve Ensminger was the most impressive offensive mind. I just am not buying that.
Yeah, it's tough too. And you talk about a guy who's been around for a long time and has been in and out of a lot of offensive systems. So I definitely think the knowledge base is there. But when you talk about Matt Canada, guru and innovator and all these words were coming up because you were moving out of that Les Miles era of, hey, we're just going to run it down your throat and we're going to rush for 2,000 yards with our running back, and we might not be that good at quarterback. And so while I believe, and I have been climbing on Steve Ensminger here recently, maybe I'm just believing the campaign. Maybe I'm just starting to fall for some of the stuff we've seen, because I have gone back and looked at some of that interim basis stuff he was doing, and it was pretty good. But I do have a hard time believing, if you're going to measure them up next to each other, just on a scale of offensive minds, that you're not going to look at Matt Canada and think that he's a little bit better.
Couple comments. Cliff Nelson says, Ensminger mentioned what you mentioned, set records for production his first game when Orgeron was the interim, and that was with someone else's offense. The problem, though, is he was running somebody else's offense. He was running that same, sort of like toss sweep stuff that a lot of LSU fans have told us they were tired of there. And listen, I love Cliff, and I love our LSU viewers to death here, but they are putting a lot of emphasis on a very small sample size here. I mean, I have a hard time buying into a portion of a season being proof of anything. Proof of the bad, proof of the good. To me, a portion of a season just doesn't really prove a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, Shannon Burgess says that, don't buy into it. That's fine. But if you think, but I think there will be some crow eating. And listen, I'll be the first. That's
fine. I'll be the first to do that.
I'll be the first one to line up and eat it. If Steve Ensminger comes in and lights it up, and all of a sudden, they've got their quarterback and Miles Brennan, they've got a new running back, a new offensive line that's pointing in the right direction, I will say yes. I was wrong about Steve Ensminger, but boy, there's a lot of stuff between now and then that really has to pass the test for me to come out and eat some crow.
And listen, I'll even say I was wrong before then. Get me James Foster in Baton Rouge on Wednesday. I'm gonna say I'm wrong right there because it's more. I mean, if you think that LSU is going to be fine with their quarterback of the future being a battle between Miles Brennan, who could not unseat Danny Etling, and Lowell Narcisse, who couldn't get on the field in 2017, that's not the battle that a quarterback of the future is going to be born out of. You need to insert somebody else in that conversation. You need to insert a James Foster in that conversation. You probably should have inserted a Justin Rogers, but that ship has sailed in recruiting. But you need somebody else there. So bring in a Foster. Beat out Texas A&M for James Foster. I guess beat out Alabama to a certain extent. Do that on Wednesday. I'm going to say, you know what? Ensminger's already doing better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and the question for me then would be the clock starts, and it's kind of like an Emory Jones situation where do we see James Foster on the field? And I think Jeremy Pettis brings up a good point. They're going to be facing off with Miami and Arlington here in 7 months. I mean, that kind of goes back to what we were looking at, these big opening games. You're getting your hand forced at some of these different situations, and it's not always that way where you can just ease into it.
Right.
You've got to have a quarterback that can take the field. If you're Steve Ensminger, that guy has to be ready to go game one.
The difference, though, for James Foster, I know we're kind of getting into the weeds of recruiting. If you're not an LSU fan or a Florida fan, you may not be 100% aware of who some of these guys are. But the difference for me between a James Foster and Emory Jones is that Jones, to me, even though Felipe Franks was an Army All-American, is clearly as a prospect much higher than Felipe Franks.
Whereas, different skill set,
but also just a better prospect.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, if this is like the pro sports, no one's trading Felipe Franks for Emory Jones. Emory Jones is a better prospect. Whereas like Foster probably sort of fits more into a Brennan Narcisse thing. That's just a good competition. 3 guys. I'm not sure who the best one is. But it's a better competition with 3 than it would be with 2.
Well, yeah, and that's where I go. That if Foster does sign on the dotted line Wednesday and is headed to LSU, and Steve Ensminger wants this offense to kind of prove that they're not like archaic, they're not back in the Les Miles era, then I think at some point you try to go that direction. I don't know if it's this year, and I think James Foster might be a guy that you look at and say we need to develop him. But if Steve Ensminger is going to prove to me that it's not this old style of offense that he's been around, and it is, he is an offensive guru and an offensive-minded guy, then at some point I think they do move that direction.
A lot of comments come in the comments section. Jake Hickenbotham says Brennan and Narcisse are both better than James Foster. He goes, hell, McMillan might even be better than Foster. It's fine to say that about Foster. Apparently you're down on him, but I mean, I got to tell you, I'm a little down on both Brennan and Narcisse because I think there was an opportunity they gave Brennan a chance last year and he couldn't unseat Danny Etling. Now, Etling didn't have a bad year necessarily, but that would have been a pretty good year to have a quarterback of the future emerge. They gave Brennan the chance, he couldn't do it, and Narcisse never even sniffed getting on the field.
Yeah,
that's just a fact.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it, is that there was an opportunity last year for one of these guys to really jump up. And Brennan did get the playing time, and you didn't see much of anybody other than Danny Etling, though, but that's kind of what I mean. When you look at Steve Ensminger and what he's trying to build and trying to send this offense to the next level, do we keep going back to the well here and going back to these guys just because they're older and been in the system, or do you say, hey, James Foster has that upside in the end?
Esteban Esteves also called Steve Ensminger Coach E a moment ago. Are you okay with a Coach O and a Coach E on the same team? Is Dave Aranda now Coach A?
I think Aranda said that in the
he did say that
right
in the comments.
Yeah.
Are we
cool with that?
Are we okay with O and E and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, LSU can be DBU, and they can also be Coach one letter U. I mean, those guys, going all to the well on that. I like that. I'm okay with it.
Item number 5 here in our SEC Country Live 1st and 10. I mentioned a moment ago that a lot of SEC fans sort of use the Super Bowl as a chance to kind of like tweet about a bunch of SEC stuff and maybe in some cases settle a bunch of vendettas about, kind of issues from the past, including way back a long time ago. You may remember when Lane Kiffin was coach at Tennessee, recruiting for the Vols, gave Alshon Jeffrey a hard time about not leaving the state to come to Tennessee. And, well, according to an ESPN story, in fact, we'll show you the quote here from Chris Lowe, Kiffin told Alshon Jeffrey that if he chose the Gamecocks, he'd end up pumping gas for the rest of his life like all the other players from that state who had gone to South Carolina. So that's pretty aggressive recruiting on Kiffin's part. Well, last night Alshon Jeffrey scores a touchdown for the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl, and a lot of SEC fans, of course, remember what Kiffin said. There was an SEC country story about this, and you see all the tweets about Alshon Jeffrey not pumping gas. Great job by our team kind of collecting this. All these tweets of people reminding Lane Kiffin what he'd said in the past about Alshon Jeffrey there. We assume it's true. ESPN obviously reported it. Do you think it is wrong what Kiffin apparently said to Alshon Jeffrey? Is that taking the recruiting too far, almost a full decade ago by now?
I feel like it's unprofessional. I feel like that he definitely, kind of blurs the lines on what you're supposed to say to recruits. But honestly, at the time, and I was in school when this was going on, I think that was signing class of 2009, if I'm not mistaken.
You were still there, yeah.
So, Lane Kiffin's in his first year as a head coach at Tennessee, and Tennessee fans loved it. They loved the fact that this guy was doing things outside the box. I mean, he's telling Urban Meyer he's doing recruiting violations.
Yeah.
He's doing all this stuff that Pete Carroll used to do at USC. So I feel like for a lot of people, Lane Kiffin loved kind of just throwing a wrench into things and doing things differently at Tennessee. I think a lot of Tennessee fans at the time felt like that had to be done. And I will point out yesterday in the Super Bowl, not only was Alshon Jeffrey playing well, the guy who guarded him was Stephon Gilmore, who was his roommate at South Carolina. So those guys ended up being pretty good,
too. A lot of SEC guys. Derek Barnett recovers to fumble for the Eagles. Georgia had a couple guys involved in the game. A lot of SEC guys there. Here's my overall takeaway on this, and you obviously experienced this in kind of a different era than we're in now, but I think it's still kind of the same thing. I'm not scandalized by this at all. This is one of those things that Kiffin didn't say publicly. He didn't say this in an interview. He said this privately to Jeffrey, allegedly, and Jeffrey then relayed it to the ESPN writer. I feel like in recruiting, a lot of this kind of stuff probably goes on a lot more than we realize, and you know what? This is just how the business gets done. Our audience probably has more of a stomach for this than some casual fans probably do.
Probably so.
We heard the story a few months ago about how Saban had told the kid from Louisiana that if he didn't choose Alabama, he was just going to beat him for 4 years. And as it turns out, that's exactly kind of what would have happened there. I feel like this stuff just kind of goes on, probably privately behind closed doors. Recruiting can be kind of a full contact, not for the faint of heart type stuff. I'm actually not mad at Kiffin for doing this, even though ultimately he sort of has egg on his face for how things turned out for Jeffrey. I'm not mad at Kiffin about this. I think all fans want their coaches doing this.
That's kind of what I mean. Like, I feel like the only people that are going to be really mad are South Carolina fans. They're going to look at it and go, say, whoa. You can't just say those things about it. It's not backed up by any fact. I mean, there's plenty of I played with a ton of South Carolina players in the NFL. So South Carolina fans are going to get agitated. But I feel like the other 13 teams in the SEC, you're right, or I guess it was, 11 other SEC teams at the time when he was doing it. I feel like, those teams are okay with it. And I was okay with what Saban said, and I'm not really traumatized by Lane Kiffin saying this in 2009. I feel like he was doing his best to sell his program and to get Tennessee to the next level with a guy like Alshon Jeffrey. I
mean, and by the way, some of our LSU viewers are reminding us about Jalen Mills, Donnie Jones in this game. And the bottom line for me on the Kiffin discussion, going back to 2009, or the coaches currently in the SEC, if you're not recruiting in such a way that it's making your rivals mad, you're probably not recruiting as hard as you need to be recruiting,
I tend to agree,
All right, item number 6 here on SEC Country Live, our first and 10 list. Speaking of SEC players in the Super Bowl, Georgia set a little bit of a mark last night, now leading the SEC by putting a player in the Super Bowl for the 17th consecutive year. You had Daniel Ellerbe, who did play for the Philadelphia Eagles, and David Boss Andrews was the starter at center last night for the New England Patriots, an undrafted free agent who's worked his way into a starting role there in New England, kind of an impressive role on that. But 17 consecutive years, Georgia's had a player in the Super Bowl, most in the SEC. Chip Towers, who covers the Georgia Bulldogs for DogNation.com, weighed in on the significance.
Georgia always very well represented. And I think the key on that is just, opportunity. And Georgia keeps putting players in the NFL.
So that's Chip Towers on that. And I'm a Georgia fan, obviously, but I got to admit, this is not that big of a deal to me, right? I mean, the Super Bowl is sort of a random chance occurrence. I mean, you could be a great player, play for a long time, not play in a Super Bowl.
Right.
It's not necessarily a designation who the best players have been. I guess it's kind of cool that it's happened 17 years in a row. That's kind of sort of an amazing number, I guess. But I don't know that it says anything sort of especially good about Georgia.
No, I'm kind of with you where it's kind of, I don't want to say it's an empty stat because it is impressive, but I think LSU's had people in 17 years in a row. I think Florida's at 16, Bama's at like 14. You're going to find the top programs around college football are going to be there. The Ohio States, the Texas, the USC's, and I think Georgia just kind of falls into that category where there's always been a ton of talent.
Wait, so LSU's had 17 years in a row too?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so I got this from Georgia. They didn't make any mention of LSU. I guess the LSU PR can take care of their own work. Yeah, Georgia only mentioned its own.
Which is fair enough. I wouldn't expect them to mention LSU. And I don't want to say it's an empty streak because it is impressive. But if you're going to point to the guys that are in the Super Bowl, I mean, Florida I think had 3 pretty prominent players yesterday with Trey Burton, Caleb Sturgis, and Jalen Watkins. I would rather have the guys that are prominent in the Super Bowl victory than the guys that are like the gunners on the punt team and are just, kind of an empty stat.
I think that, is this true that Burton became the first former Gator to throw a touchdown in the Super Bowl?
No, I heard that, but it's not true. It was Rex Grossman was
with the Redskins.
But yeah, it was the second one though.
Okay, yeah, there you go. I mean, I will admit that, and I've said this before, I like college football, and I mean this literally, about 10,000 times more than I like the NFL. So when I watch the Super Bowl, half the time all I'm watching for are the former SEC guys who are in the game. I mentioned Derek Barnett, the LSU guys, the Georgia guys, Burton, Alshon Jeffrey. I mean, that is for me kind of cool, and it actually sort of goes back to the point that Chip Towers was kind of making a moment ago, which is you got to have a bunch of guys in the NFL to have 17 years worth in the Super Bowl. And as you said, that's true for the LSUs, the Georgias, everybody else in the world. You got to have a big talent pool in order to have a guy show up in the Super Bowl every other year.
Yeah, and honestly, when you look at the stat, it could be taken in an opposite direction too. You sit there and go, well, 17 years worth of Super Bowl players, we haven't had that much success on the field in the last 17 years, and I think that you can be taking the opposite direction.
That's been used against Georgia before as well. Yeah. That it's top 10
it's
recruiting.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it's top 10 recruiting classes. It is a bunch of guys doing very well in the NFL, and kind of what happens in between there. You've definitely heard people sort of ding Georgia for that in the past. That's one of the things that Kirby Smart's trying to change at UGA. Right?
No, I agree with you. And to me, when you do look at all those guys from the SEC especially, I mean, it's very apparent that those guys were prepared as soon as they stepped into the league.
All right, let's dive into number 7 here. Topic number 7 here on the SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Kind of some interesting news for Alabama over the weekend, missing out on a couple of quarterbacks. First of all, Brevin White, who we talked about on Thursday's show, the 4-star prospect, considering between Princeton and Alabama. He chose the Princeton Tigers. And then another quarterback, this time of the 3-star variety, also deciding he doesn't want to come to Alabama. That's Brock Purdy. The quote here from Purdy is that I'm moving on from them. Chris Kirshner, SEC Country, reports that Purdy could not get confirmation that his offer to Alabama was committable, so therefore he sort of slides on. He's going to look other places. We talked about James Foster before. Alabama has recruited Foster some. He's from Montgomery. I don't quite know where that stands.
I don't think it's a committable offer at this point, but it could change in the next 2 days. Who knows?
It certainly seems like at the moment Alabama is in a position where it may not get a quarterback for the class of 2018. Is that the kind of thing that Alabama ought to be worried about?
Well, it worries me. It definitely worries me, and I think that Alabama, I think they tried to go out, they tried to do some things quarterback-wise, but I think you look at next year's class, they already have offers out to Paul Tyson, who's Bear Bryant's grandson, and Talia Tagovailoa, who's Tua's little brother. And so I think that they feel very comfortable with maybe landing 2 quarterbacks in the next cycle. So I don't think you overreach yourself in this cycle as far as quarterbacks goes. And you saw the way they went about it. I mean, James Foster is their in-state. I don't think that offer is committable. But you go out and offer Brock Purdy, you offer Brevin White, who's going to Princeton, obviously. It doesn't look to me like Nick Saban's panicking. I mean, you do have a couple of preferred walk-ons out there. I guess that's the route that he's thinking about going depth-wise. But for me, I look at it and I say, well, if Jalen Hurts transfers, then Mac Jones is your backup quarterback. And while I think he can develop into a good player, I don't know that I want national championship hopes riding on Mac Jones. So it's a little bit of a panic for me.
Yeah, I do think that you say a little bit of a panic. That may be a good description. It actually puts, I think, a pretty interesting spotlight on Alabama in the spring, whereas everybody wants to see Tua Tagovailoa develop and grow from where he ended the season, leading Alabama to a national championship. But you got to be careful if you're Nick Saban and new offensive coordinator Mike Locksley, new quarterback coach Dan Enos. You've got to be careful how you handle this, because if the spring unfolds in such a way where Tua puts distance between himself and Jalen Hurts, at that point in time, Hurts may see the writing on the wall. He may choose to look around at the end of the spring. And I don't think if you're trying to be in the national championship business, I don't think you want Mac Jones being your primary backup. That's not disrespectful to Jones. He just hasn't played. I mean, you'd like to have a guy that's either a little older, a little bit more experienced. You'd like to have something along those lines. And, I mean, Alabama, I totally agree with you. Tua's brother, Bear Bryant's great-grandson, whatever else. I mean, that's pretty good prospects of the future when those signing classes come to be. But for 2018, you may be a little thin.
Yeah, you're definitely going to be thin. And I guess the reason that Nick Saban probably feels comfortable in doing this is, you look at some of the prospects he had. I don't know that you would have felt comfortable about Brock Purdy being your backup next year either. And so, I guess that kind of all washes out. They also have I mentioned preferred walk-ons. Jay Barker's son is actually going to be walking on at Alabama.
Are you serious?
Yeah, Jay Barker's son.
Oh my gosh, how old am I?
Be walking on next year at Alabama.
Jay Barker's old enough. Barker, for those of you who are younger than me, he was the national championship quarterback for Alabama back in, I think it was 92.
Right.
Gene Stallings national championship.
Yep.
I feel like that was like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
He's old enough to have a son walking on in Alabama.
Yeah,
that's amazing to me.
Walking on Alabama. And everybody says he's good. He had scholarship offers other places. So maybe Nick just sees that and says, I feel like we're comfortable with next year's situation, but that doesn't make me feel any better, and I don't know if it makes Bama fans feel any better.
Yeah, so here's my issue in the Alabama quarterback situation. If you can get a great player, you get one. if you can't get a great player, you get as many average players as you can.
Right, yeah.
And that's why a Brevin White or a Brock Purdy or maybe even a James Foster, that's why they would have some value, because they overall add up to be a group of people that you might be able to find someone from. I mean, the truth is, maybe Mac Jones is fine. Maybe Jones is good enough to be a backup. Maybe, I mean, he was at one point in time a Kentucky commit, so he had other SEC offers besides Alabama. It's a little bit weird to be the second quarterback in a class. You join the class with Tua Tagovailoa. He may be very good. He may be fine, but I think he's made better if he's got more guys he's got to compete with.
Yeah, and you know, I think there's going to be a lot of breath holding next year. If you're Alabama, and listen, I'm still hoping that Jalen Hurts stays around. I don't know that it happens. I think it's a toss-up whether or not Jalen Hurts decides to transfer. But if he does, and Tua's your starting quarterback and your backup is Mac Jones, I just think you hold your breath a ton. I don't think that allows you to really open the playbook under Michael Locksley. I don't know that you're going to run Tua a bunch of times out of the backfield if your backup is Mac Jones.
All right, we got a lot of stuff we want to do here in SEC Country Live. Can I hit a few comments? Some of these are on topic, some of these are not. These are just going to be kind of trickling in here for a moment. First of all, some of y'all are giving me a hard time for not giving LSU enough credit for its draft stuff. I gave you credit for the guys who are in the game. I gave you credit for the nobody produces NFL talent like LSU. I said that a moment ago, and
catching flack, man.
Some of y'all just like to find something to nitpick.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about that. LSU, it's impressive the amount of talent LSU has in the NFL currently. It's crazy.
Also, Bo Molinari early in the comment section, I did want to make sure we hit this. He talked about Texas A&M right now. That's his school, Texas A&M. We're actually going to probably talk about this at some point in time this week. It's sort of hard to squeeze it in before signing day on Wednesday. But A&M is killing it on the 2019 recruiting trail right now. And, that's sort of understandable. Short-term relationships sort of hard to kind of close the deal with in 2018. You can do a little bit more long-range recruiting for 2019. Jimbo Fisher, who at one point in time before he absolutely quit on Florida State, and he did. You can look that up. He quit on that program. But before he did, he was a very good recruiter, and he's showing some of that energy at Texas A&M. They are loading up for 2019 right now. 5-star guys, big-name guys. Good work by Jimbo for that 2019 class.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple here in the last week. I think Cam Brown was one of them. Wolf was another guy that's committed for next year. I will say this. You got to be careful sometimes those 2019 guys being that early. I mean, Bama's been hit with a ton of decommitments. I know Georgia's had one. I think Florida's had a couple of decommitments from next year too. But, from all indications, Jimbo has just gone out ahead of himself and said, listen, 2018 be what it is. 2019, we will kill it in the state of Texas. And they've already started down that road. It is impressive.
Antoine Fomby also on Jalen Hurts says that Hurts should transfer to Arizona to go play with Kevin Sumlin. Obviously, Arizona's in pretty good shape at the quarterback position right now with, what's his name?
Khalil Tate.
Khalil Tate, excuse me, yeah. But maybe Hurts pair with Sumlin after that. I don't know that's the kind of quarterback that Sumlin's looking for. Sumlin likes to throw the football, and that's obviously the reason why that Hurts isn't the quarterback at Alabama right now. But Hurts shopping around for another opportunity. I think at some point in time that probably happens.
No, I think so too. I think so too, and definitely, I think he looks a lot stronger at that possibility if you do have that NCAA rule comes down and these players are eligible immediately for next season. I think if that happens and Jalen takes a strong look and says, I got 2 years left. I don't know if you look at FAU. I don't know if you look at other programs that are strong with running quarterbacks, but as much as I love Jalen Hurts, I know the guy's probably got goals for his career and he's going to do whatever he has to reach them.
All right, let's do item number 8 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And you mentioned this a moment ago that sometimes when it comes to social media, I sort of show my age. This may be an example of that. Obviously, there is nobody that loves picking on Florida more than I do, given my background, my connection to the Georgia program. But the sort of overabundant criticism of Florida students for this doesn't 100% make sense to me, I have to be honest with you. So there was a video captured of Florida students during the basketball game. They're dancing here to a popular hip-hop song, maybe, I'm guessing. I actually don't even know what song it was, although at one point in time I read about this. And I guess the joke here is there's not a lot of rhythm, there's not a lot of, sort of like continuity with the dance here. You don't have a lot of cohesion between the moves here. But this thing has been like ripped to death on Twitter. Is it as bad as social media is making it out to be?
It's bad for me. And let me tell you how I watched this video too. And this might help you out with how bad it is. I want you to watch the kid in like the front right row that's on the stairs at one point, and I think it's when the camera is like just starting off on the right side of this thing, and watch the guy's rhythm. That's like what I focused on when it first came on, and he's kind of giving you the You know, like the whole, and it's so bad that like once you focus on one person, you can't take your eyes off how bad some of these people are at dancing in the student section.
Phil Molinari says I'm the original Gator hater. Bobby Bryan does too, and to an extent that's true. But I have a hard time hating on this video as bad as some people probably want me to, because listen, while I may look like an old man now, when I was a younger person, I went to some college parties. This is the way every person I ever saw at a college party, this is the way that real people dance.
No. Look at the girl there. I can't catch anybody fast enough to really point out somebody that's a bad dancer.
Listen,
there are a bunch of them.
I know we just all watched the Super Bowl halftime show where like Justin Timberlake's busting out a bunch of moves. That's not how normal people dance.
Yeah.
Normal people dance like that. They don't have any rhythm. They don't have
true.
any.
I'm definitely one of those guys.
This is how normal people kind of go about it.
Well, I mean, I consider myself a normal person. I just wouldn't be dancing at a basketball game, at halftime and doing all the moves. I think that's what's so funny about it.
The other thing here is, and maybe young people know this in a way that the rest of us don't. I mean, the expectation that if you break out the moves and dance, you're going to end up being videoed and critiqued online. There's something sort of sinister about that, isn't there? I mean, isn't the phrase "dance like nobody's watching"? The whole point is you're supposed to sort of not really care, like how people are reacting to you. All of a sudden, you got the Twitter world and shows like this sort of breaking the thing down.
I'm telling you, when I'm on my own time, and my girlfriend likes to Snapchat. She likes to put on Snapchat, and I always look at her. I'm like, can I just live my life? Like, can I just live my life and not be in front of a camera and dance and sing when I want to?
Yeah, listen, my number one rule for when I am hanging out with friends, no pictures, no cameras, don't bring that kind of stuff out.
Yeah.
Can we have a little privacy here? If we're going to relax and unwind, can we have just a little bit of privacy on that? Josh Harris says in the comment section, they all had the patented white man overbite while they were dancing. There is a little of that kind of going on. I mean, the truth is, they're probably moving around a little bit more than I probably realized. Hannah said something to us. Hannah, what did you say? I didn't hear you. Oh,
did she say? What did she say? Fiance?
I didn't hear.
I called her my girlfriend a minute ago. I think she said fiance.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, I didn't realize. I'm not trying to bring the personal stuff.
Don't throw me under the bus on that one.
Chad Clark says doing the jean short boogie. I guess.
Rick Keene says, "How well do you dance, Mike?" And here's my answer to this. It always has been my answer. There is a height limit on dancing well.
That's such a good point.
There is like a 6 foot or 6'1" height limit on being a good dancer, and I am well over that height limit.
Such a good point.
Yes.
Like Mike is. I mean, when we're sitting down, we sort of look like the same size. But when we both stand up, I mean, you really get the sense this is a guy that played in the National Football League, and I'm just a guy that spent one too many trips to the buffet. I mean, you just sort of get the sense of that. And there is something about being a very big guy trying to dance.
Right.
It's a little. I mean, that is sort of that's a tricky thing to pull off.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is. And I do have those parts where like I've been in a lot of weddings, and they're like, the whole bridal party, get up on the stage, and I'm always that guy in the back going, not really my scene, man. I don't want to go down that road.
That is not for me. Speaking of football players dancing, let's also make that the subject of item number 9 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. A couple former SEC stars team up for this one. The former Ole Miss quarterback Eli Manning, the former LSU wide receiver Odell Beckham, now teammates with the New York Giants. And for the NFL Network, the NFL Network does a commercial like this sort of every year about next year's good teams and who else is going to be good and looking forward to the upcoming season. But they've never done one quite like this where Manning and Beckham sort of team up to do, if you're old enough to remember the Dirty Dancing movie from the 80s, here is Beckham and Manning doing their rendition of that. Take a look at this.
Gonna work on that thing? Yeah, let's do it. Let's get it.
So right now they're just working on football, which is kind of what you expect them to do. Then the music kicks in. And at this point, Mike, things for me start to get a little weird here. First of all, Beckham's a pretty good dancer. Now Eli's about as bad as you might think. Beckham's got a little bit of rhythm here. I think that these guys are going to regret this.
No.
And to me, this sort of feels like that thing of, how like sometimes you do something not realizing the internet's forever? This is one of those things that's like
DJ Fluker.
Fluker back there, the former Alabama guy.
John Jerry and Ole Miss linebacker.
All right, so here's the famous scene from Dirty Dancing. I guess Odell Beckham in the Jennifer Grey role here. Eli Manning plays the role of Patrick Swayze there. I feel like this is a regrettable decision. I'm not just saying this for the purpose of us having something to talk about. I think if you're a Giants fan, you got to hate this. Your rival is winning the Super Bowl. Your two best players are pretending to be some 80s romance movie. This is unbecoming of good football players.
Listen, they're terrible. Eli's a terrible dancer. That rule I just said, Eli's what, 6'5"? That rule is so applicable here. He's a bad dancer, but I loved it, man. You're not in the Super Bowl. Eli's been through a ton. The Giants have been through a ton this offseason. The whole offensive line's in the background. Landon Collins on the sideline. I thought it was great branding by the NFL to kind of say, to me, it was like a signal that celebrations are back, and this, we can just be fun about this thing. I think the purpose of it was to say, hey, we're just having fun around here, and it's a game.
All right, a lot of people weighing in on this. Michael Morrow says, I bet Mike Johnson hasn't seen Dirty Dancing. For those of you who don't know, sometimes we give Mike a hard time. His pop cultural references probably aren't. Have you seen Dirty Dancing?
No, definitely haven't.
The truth is,
I've seen the dance scene, but I've never.
The honest truth here is, I know the movie, I know the dance scene. Like, the moment you see somebody doing that, I know what movie it's from. I haven't seen the whole movie.
Yeah,
I think it comes on cable all the time. Does anybody, are y'all you're a Dirty Dancing fan? Yeah, Hannah's a Dirty Dancing fan. Patrick, do you know the movie? A little bit, he says. So I haven't seen the whole movie.
Well, Shannon Burgess gives you the hashtag lighten up, says, BA, you're taking it way too serious.
Okay, so and a lot of people kind of saying the same thing. Brian Bratton says, who cares? It's funny. So maybe I'm viewing this from the wrong perspective. I totally agree. It's funny. When I saw it last night, I couldn't help but laugh. But where my mind went immediately was rivals using this against them. It's like, if you're an LSU fan, you want to hold up Odell Beckham as a great former player. Can the Alabama guys now say, but yeah, he danced in that commercial? Same thing for the Mississippi State fans with Eli Manning, yeah, but he danced in that commercial. Can this not be used against you a little bit?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's just great branding to me. It's them it's them saying we're not too big of a deal to go out there and dance in front of a commercial camera. I loved it, man.
Would you want Tua Tagovailoa holding Devontae Smith up in the air and dancing with him?
If they were making $15 million a year, like both those guys are, at least. Then
no, that's dodging the question.
Well, to me, it's like these guys are millionaire athletes that take their job very seriously, and for them to get in front of a camera for a commercial kind of brings them back to earth and makes them kind of an everybody now.
Steve Weaver says being terrible is what made it great. I don't deny that. Josh Harris says, who was the worst dancer, Eli or the Florida student section? The truth is like, I was actually pretty impressed with Beckham as a dancer.
Yeah, I was too. And Cliff Nelson's on your side. I mean, he says it's terrible, and every there's been a couple of people that have been on your side about it. I thought it was cool, man. I laughed during this commercial a lot. I thought it was hilarious that John Jerry from Ole Miss and DJ Fluker from Bama are in the background, kind of getting it on. I mean, those guys are massive people.
Chad Clark says we'd all do that dance for the money that got paid. Totally agree with that. But here's my question for you, and you played in the league, so this is actually a legit question for you. How many teams do you think they had to pitch that to?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some guys that are just not doing that.
Yeah, they probably got some no's along the way. I think that Odell Beckham might have been one of their top guys, but I guarantee you that at some point, if they'd have gone to other people, they'd have been like, nah, man, there's no way I'm doing that. Because, I mean, they had to practice that, for a little bit of time at least.
But it's not just about it being a lot of work. It's also
it's about an image.
Yeah, do I want to be seen as the guy doing this dance?
I wouldn't be shocked if they got some no's. Yeah. I definitely know people that I played with. Like Roddy White would have never done something like
Bo
that.
Molinari says they were just trying to upstage their rival Eagles on their big day. Yeah, maybe that is the case. Let's do item number 10 here on our SEC Country Live of First and 10. Speaking of NFC East rivals, another team in that division is the Dallas Cowboys. They are owned by Jerry Jones, the former Arkansas player, now a big-time booster for the Razorbacks, and his grandson just committed to Arkansas for its class of 2018, and obviously Arkansas needs a quarterback. That's the position that Jones plays, and Trent Shaded, who covers Arkansas recruiting for SECCountry.com, kind of makes the comparison between Jones, who will be a preferred walk-on in Arkansas, and another preferred walk-on that's done great things. What Trent writes is, if you see John Stephen Jones, that's Jerry Jones' grandson, in public, nothing about him suggests he's a standout football player. Arkansas quarterback commit appears too small. There's no reason to believe he's overly athletic, but he just looks like a typical high school senior. But Trent goes on to write, but that's also what people have been saying about 2017 Heisman Trophy winner Baker Mayfield for a long time. The similarities between Jones and Mayfield at this point are many. And then Trent goes on to sort of list what they are. They both had outstanding high school careers. John Stephen Jones actually played at Highland Park in Texas, which is where Matthew Stafford went. So he's a part of a big-time program there. Are you buying that Jerry Jones' grandson could be the next Baker Mayfield?
Oh, I got to be selling that one. I don't know if anybody's absolutely buying this, but I am giving this 2 thumbs up though, and I have 2 reasons why I'm giving this 2 thumbs up. First of all, there is no way in my mind this kid is taking a football scholarship to the University of Arkansas. There's no way.
He's a walk-on.
Not only is he a walk-on, even if they would have offered him a scholarship, Jerry Jones is not going to let his grandson take up a scholarship from this program when they could send it to somebody else. He's just going to say, listen, well, I'll pay your way. What's, $150,000 check? Yeah, I'll write that out right now. Second of all, Chad Morris has to do this. He's got to find some diamonds in the rough. He's got to go out and find some guys that he can develop, because right now the big-time recruits aren't coming in. So if you have to find somebody with a ton of upside, like a Baker Mayfield, that's a route you're going to have to take if you're him.
First of all, I love Trent Shadid's piece. I think that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, sell the positive for a program. Arkansas fans want to believe and have some hope. I got nothing wrong with him kind of doing that. I don't mind him going down that road. And I hate to be a jerk here, and it's not fair to do this to Jones just because, his granddad is famous here. But, and I'm right about this, Jerry Jones is the biggest Arkansas booster in the world, one of the biggest anyway, and his grandson just became a commit this week. If he was any good, he would have been the first guy a part of this class.
Right,
and he'd be getting a scholarship, whatever else. He'd be anything. I mean, this is one of those things that sort of feels back to Jerry Bohannon turned us down. We can't get any other quarterback. This just sort of feels like the last, excuse me.
Bless you. That's twice in like 2 weeks.
This never happened. I apologize. That is completely unprofessional. I could not stop that from coming out. But this feels like we got nowhere else to turn. We might as well give Jerry Jones' grandson a spot in the class. If he was any good, he'd already be in the class.
He had offers to Texas Tech. I think he had one to Kansas, SMU. So he had offers out there. But to me, in the end, it always kind of felt like this was Arkansas's fallback. We feel like we can definitely get this kid on campus. And that's why I know that he was never offered a scholarship. And it wasn't that he even needed to be offered a scholarship, because Jerry Jones isn't going to let his grandkid take up a scholarship offer.
Bo Molinari says the kid's a legacy. He's going to play in, guard, and tackle. He's going to sit on the end of the bench, guard the water bucket, and tackle anyone who comes near. And I got to tell you, I sort of feel that way. Yeah. Now, you mentioned Bear Bryant's, is it great-grandson or grandson?
Great-grandson.
Now, he's like a real player.
Yeah, he is. He's like 6'5", gunslinger.
The Alabama quarterback of the future, potentially, is like a real quarterback who does have real offers. I want to see the paper that got sent to Jerry Jones' grandson that offers him a scholarship somewhere. Yeah. I want to see that. Is Texas Tech really offering him a scholarship?
Well, listen, I don't think that he would have ever had one in Arkansas. Like I said, I don't think that Jerry Jones would have let him take up an offer. I just feel like I give it 2 thumbs up, because Chad Morris isn't walking through with any 5-star quarterbacks this time around. He's just not. Yeah. And I feel like this is the kind of guy you have to say, I look at this kid's number from high school. It's like 54 touchdowns and like 3 interceptions or something crazy. Yeah, but back-to-back state championships.
I'm going to tell you this, and some people are going to get upset with me. The most overrated thing in the world is Texas high school football because of the complete lack of defense.
No.
Texas, you want to know what's wrong with the Big 12? It's that the teams in the league are populated by Texas high school kids who are all about offense and all about defense.
There's been a ton of great quarterbacks come out of Texas. Matt Stafford came out of Texas. Those guys have been good.
You're not hearing what I'm saying. Texas high school football is too offensive-oriented. There's not enough defense. You know why the SECs win the national championships and the Big 12 teams are kind of falling short, kind of coming up short? It's the commitment to defense that exists in this part of the country. The Big 12
is speed, size and speed.
Size and speed, that's fine, but it's also a commitment to defense. Go to any high school team in Texas, you get all the best athletes all playing on offense. In the SEC and the high school footprint around this league, you get a lot more of those guys on the defensive side of the football, because this part of the country, not just the SEC itself, but the high schools within the SEC footprint, they just understand the importance of defense in a way that does not seem to exist out in the Big 12. They're selling offense, they're selling 70 points a game, they're selling the spread stuff, and it's hurting the Big 12, and it's starting at the high school level.
Boy, I couldn't disagree with you more.
Stick up for your region?
There's been so many good quarterbacks come out of the state of Texas that there's no way I could possibly call it overhyped. I just couldn't. There's been a ton of them that have come out from the state of Texas. And Shannon Burgess says Drew Brees. Jalen Hurts is from Texas. Greg McElroy was from Texas. I can't even start to name the list of great quarterbacks.
You're talking about individual names. I'm talking about the general population. The general population of Texas. It hurts the college level. I'm not telling you can't find some great quarterbacks. Texas is a gigantic state. It's always going to produce a lot. I'm saying there's a philosophy that exists in Texas football that it makes the brand of football played there inferior to what exists in the Southeast, because the Southeast emphasizes defense in a way they don't do so in Big 12 country, and Big 12 country is really sort of defined by Texas.
I understand what you're saying. I think that good quarterbacks can be found. That's my only point. Good quarterbacks can be found. Whether or not their stats are inflated doesn't mean they can't be good quarterbacks.
But to go back to the point we started with, the Jones kid from Highland Park, I don't buy into a lot of these stats because of how inflated the stats are in that part of the country. They like the spread stuff a lot more.
Right, and I think that's fair. I just think, to me, it's kind of eye-popping to say 54 touchdowns and 4 interceptions or whatever stats, or somewhere along. I mean, that's pretty incredible no matter who you're playing against.
Bo Molinari says, BA, in Texas, you get a football for your first birthday, you have to throw a spiral by 2. I mean, listen, I do love that. Nobody loves Friday Night Lights more than I do, and all that kind of stuff. I just think the brand of football that exists in the rest of the SEC, from a high school standpoint, prepares this league for the college level better than what happens in the state of Texas.
There's definitely other states in the SEC that play a better defensive brand for sure. I'll agree with you on that.
Here on SEC Country Live, we're always looking to close the show the same way every day. We're always looking for champions of life. And today, I have to admit something. Maybe I have sort of failed my son here. I don't say this lightly. This is something that I actually feel a little bit of guilt and shame about just a bit. So we live in Atlanta. That's where we do the show from every single day. I don't care that much about the NFL, but to the extent that I do care about the NFL team I'd root for would be the Falcons. Falcons lost the Super Bowl last year to the Patriots. I have a now 6-year-old son who has spent the last year somewhat infatuated with Tom Brady, the Patriots quarterback. My son, like a lot of young kids, is like the ultimate front runner here. He's like just sort of moves from one bandwagon to the next, and he asked for a Tom Brady Patriots jersey to watch the Super Bowl with. I actually have a photo of this I think we can show you here. And so I bought the jersey for my son. My wife, unbeknownst to me, bought him a balloon. He's also sort of chomping on a cupcake here. This was his Super Bowl party deal there. Am I a bad dad for letting my son? You got to realize we have no connection to New England whatsoever. I am from Gainesville, Georgia, and I've lived in Georgia my entire life. There is zero tie to the Patriots whatsoever. Am I a bad dad for allowing my son to sort of go down the worst sort of bandwagon hopping behavior at all? I mean, he's only 6. Does that make it better? Am I a bad dad here?
I want to say no. I'm like, I respect the fact that he likes winning, but I got to tell you, man, I think he dropped the ball here. I do. I mean, we live in Atlanta. We live around the Falcons. There's another team to root for. Not only that, but the Patriots and Tom Brady put a dagger in the Falcons' heart last year.
Donnie Slade says, you need to be shot for buying him that jersey. And listen, for me, it's not even so much the Falcon thing. I mean, I'm just not that big of an NFL fan. It's more about the bandwagon thing of, losing's a part of life. You got to stick with the same team. It just sort of feels like integrity, kind of a good life lesson. I mean, when the Patriots lost last night, my 6-year-old son took that Brady jersey off, threw it on the ground. He said he was never wearing it again.
Shut up.
I'm telling you, he ain't about that losing life, man.
Yeah. Well, and the good thing is he's 6 years old. He only has like a year left of Tom Brady, right? I mean, I think at some point. So
this jersey, by the way, is expensive. So I was sort of rooting for them last night myself because I didn't want that jersey to go to waste, but maybe it did.
Shannon Burgess said this is worse and more terrible than the commercial you are sweating a minute ago. So
Shannon, that's probably a fair point to bring up. Nonetheless, we appreciate you being with us here today on SEC Country Live. We're always looking forward to talking about the SEC with you. You can check out our podcast. It's available for you up on iTunes. We'll have it up for you right after the show. You can also share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC each and every afternoon here on SEC Country Live. Y'all have a good day. We'll look forward to seeing you once again at 3 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow.